What's up guys, Jake here. In this video, we're gonna be talking about equipment we recommend with our snowmaking systems. We're gonna be going through a couple different recommendations for our system. The first is air compressor recommendations. Second, we'll walk through pressure washer. Third, we'll walk through setup layout. Fourth, we'll talk about air hoses. And fifth, we'll talk about the water hoses. Let's take a look first at the air compressor. We'll walk through 5 of the factors to be aware of when you're picking out your air compressor. First is going to be what the air compressor can output as far as airflow and pressure. For all of our products, we recommend at least 5 CFM at 90 PSI. The Little Cloud snow gun can operate at 4.5. But as a general rule, 5 CFM at 90 PSI is going to be the minimum and our recommendation for all the snow guns that we provide. The next thing to look at is if you have a compressor that's rated over 7 CFM at 90 PSI, it'll work great in the system, but you can expect that compressor to turn on and off during operation. So what that means is the air compressor can output more air than the snow gun requires. Once it builds up pressure in the tank to a certain level, it'll cycle off, and then as air exits the tank into the snow gun, it will turn back on at a minimum pressure that's usually set on the air compressor. So the next thing is going to be power. Are you going to use a gas or electric air compressor? Most common are electric air compressors. Gas can be used if you're in a remote location or if it's easier for some specific reason, but in general we would definitely go with electric. If you're running it overnight or if you're running it and you don't want to continue to monitor the gas tank, then electric is definitely the way to go. So noise is also something to consider when running equipment. Make sure to check the decibel rating on the air compressor. Something that is as quiet as possible is usually the best. The next thing is quality. A good way to quickly check the quality is if it's oil filled or oilless. Oilless compressors are typically a little bit lower quality. Oil filled is typically higher quality just because it requires that lubrication. And lastly, something to consider would just be mobility. How mobile is your air compressor? Do you need to move it around a lot, or can you pick it up, move it where you need to? How much do you value that ability to move your air compressor around? So with all those factors considered, what we recommend is the rigid quiet air compressor. So this air compressor is going to sit right at 5.1 CFM at 90 PSI. It's right above that minimum for all of our products. It's at 77 decibels, which is pretty quiet for an air compressor, and it's going to run about $350, which is a really good price for what's going to work well with this system. Let's look at the pressure washer and some things to consider when picking out the best pressure washer for your system. The number one and most important thing is output. With the pressure washer, the output or GPM rating is going to have the biggest impact on snow output. So that's the main thing to consider, is how much water that pressure washer can move through the system. The higher the GPM rating, the more snow you'll make. Let's look at the power with the pressure washer. So the pressure washer, you can either get a gas or an electric powered pressure washer. For most people, we would recommend electric. There's a few different options as far as the power requirement. We have our 110 volt or 120 volt outlet, and that's going to plug into almost every outlet in your home. A pressure washer that will work on 110 or 120 volt power is going to do in between 1 to 2 GPM. Once you get above 2 GPM on an electric pressure washer, it's going to move into the 220 volt power requirement. So that's something that's important to note. If you want a higher GPM rating with one pressure washer and you want to go above 2 GPM, you're going to have to jump up to the 220 volt. And we'll go into more detail on how you can increase snow output with smaller 110 volt pressure washers, running them together. If you're interested in that, go check out our video on how to use multiple pressure washers in the system. For this recommendation, we'll keep it simple. Next is noise. The smaller pressure washers that are more residential will be louder, and more industrial or more commercial style pressure washers will have a lower noise level. Quality of the pressure washer itself will have different types of pumps and motors. Knowing the difference can be important as well, just to know how long you can expect the pressure washer to last. In general, there's 2 different types of pumps that can be found. There's an axial pump or a triplex pump. Most of the residential will have axial pumps. The more commercial and industrial pressure washers will have triplex pumps. As far as the motor goes, there's also the brush versus induction motor. So the brush motor will be more for the residential, and induction motor will typically be on a more industrial or commercial pressure washer. Again, mobility is important with the pressure washer. Do you need the pressure washer to be on wheels, or can it be handheld? How important is that to you? With all those factors to consider, we have 2 different recommendations. The first is going to be the Ryobi 1.2 GPM pressure washer. It's one of the cheapest pressure washers that you can find, right around $100. It's going to output 1.2 GPM, so around 1 inch of snow per hour. It is more residential, and it's a little bit louder as far as noise goes. but if you're looking for the best bang for your buck, the Ryobi is definitely going to be one that we recommend. The more commercial option that we recommend is the AR610 pressure washer. The AR610 is going to do about 1.9 GPM, so close to 2 GPM, which will output about 2 inches of snow per hour. So it's close to double what the Ryobi pressure washer is. There's a few different options of how you can set up the snow gun and the air compressor and where they're located. The first option is going to be running your equipment inside of a garage or inside of a shed. And typically what we recommend is keeping the equipment about 50 feet or less away from your snow gun. The main reason we recommend that is for the air compressor and the air hose. Having a long air hose is typically problematic for water freezing inside of the air hose. We'll go a little bit more in depth into that in the next slide, but the air compressor and the pressure washer running inside of the garage, you want to keep it about 50 feet away. You can go longer, but then there's other modifications that we'd recommend in that scenario. The other option would be to run your equipment outside. When you run the air compressor outside, it can pull cold air from the outside, which will help the freezing in the bottom nucleation nozzle. And also you can use a shorter air hose, which will eliminate any potential freezing inside of the air hose. Obviously there's potential risk running the equipment outside with weather, but overall the second option is what we typically do, and we have done both and they both work. Let's talk quickly about the air hose. The air hose is the most important hose that's going to be in the system. Our recommendation is to use rubber since it's the best in cold temperatures. If you get the PVC air hoses, once it gets cold, it's going to be hard to move it. It's not very malleable. For the air hose length, if you're running your air compressor outside next to the snow gun, then you're going to want to get a air hose that's 10 feet in length or shorter, and that's going to be the best for snow quality. 10 feet and below is going to be a really good distance to give you some space from your air compressor to the snow gun, but what it does is it eliminates potential water droplets that are in the compressor. It eliminates the risk of those freezing as those water droplets travel through the air hose into the snow gun. If you are going to run your system longer than 10 feet, or if you run the air compressor inside of your garage, then we definitely recommend insulating your air hose in order to eliminate that ice potential buildup in there as well. So what you can do is if you use a 25-foot air hose or a 50-foot air hose, then you can get pipe insulation and run it on the length of the hose, and what that'll do is it'll just reduce the risk of any water freezing inside the air hose and keep the snow quality high as well. For the water hoses, rubber is going to be the best in cold temperatures. So the garden hose and the pressure washer hose, both being rubber, is going to help you to be able to move your system around easily. Another tip as well is when you're running a long distance away from your garden spigot or your water source, you want to have a longer garden hose or low pressure hose rather than a longer pressure washer hose. What this is going to do is reduce the amount of pressure drop in the pressure washer hose and put the distance on the low pressure side of your system. Typically, if your water source is about 50 psi, you run a really long garden hose to the pressure washer, it's going to lose a little bit of pressure, but you're still going to get water to that pressure washer. Once it pressurizes the water, it's going to send high pressure water to the snow gun, and they can keep that distance short to make sure that that pressure stays high. If you run a really long pressure washer hose from the pressure washer to the snow gun, then you can drop that pressure over that distance. The snow gun itself may produce a little bit more low quality snow. You can find more info at backyardsnowstorm.com/learn. We'll go into more detail about our snow gun design, snowmaking science, recommended equipment, and frequently asked questions. Thanks for watching and have a great day.